22, where virtually every month seems to bring a new wind of change in Indian politics.
It's also a poll where political circumstances changed while the poll was being conducted, with Nitish Kumar jumping over from the NDA fold to the Mahagathbandhan fold, and therefore what impact might that have on the national big picture is also something we'll be putting out over the next several minutes. Remember, come Independence Day and Republic Day, the India Today group puts out the national Mood of the Nation opinion poll, and that's what Rajdeep and I will take you all through this weekend, give you the details of what will happen if India were to go to polls today.
And also, Rahul, the Narendra Modi government has now gone well beyond its halfway mark. So now it's really in the final stretch. When you're looking at less than 20 months before India will be going to polls again. So in a sense, this poll should give us who is ahead as we enter that last stretch of 20 months of a 5-year term.
And if you speak to anyone in the Prime Minister's office at this moment, the one word they talk about constantly is saturation. Saturation of schemes. They realize that they're heading towards the last leg. They want to ensure that all the public welfare schemes he's been working on can be taken door to door, house to house, to achieve actual saturation before 2024. That's the aim.
And while that is true, the opposition also suddenly finds itself in a position where one day in Maharashtra you lose oxygen and next day you revive yourself in Bihar. So clearly, as some opposition leaders are now saying, 2024 is no longer a done deal.
But Bihar makes it more exciting for you and me. If this was only Maharashtra kind of traffic, then it's all one way. At least with Bihar, it becomes slightly more exciting to comment on than it would be otherwise.
Sure, though I could argue that Bihar is not India and it's the last state of old-fashioned politics, which is why Bihar is something you hold on to every time, because at least, as one Bihari told me, unlike Maharashtra, we don't do resort politics. We do straight deals.
When something is going wrong in Maharashtra, you never refer to it as your state. Otherwise, it's always my state of Maharashtra. See how they did it in Bihar, with much lesser money, with much lesser tamasha than in your state of Maharashtra.
We have a little bit more money and we have a few more resorts.
Okay, I want to introduce you to all our guests joining us for this special broadcast Mood of the Nation, starting with Raj Chingappa, editorial director publishing at the India Today group. With us also our national affairs editor Rahul Srivastava, and some really sharp political minds. I want to start by introducing Manisha Priyam. She's been tracking what's happening in Bihar and elsewhere very closely. Rahul Verma joins us, fellow at the Center for Policy Research. Representing the political spectrum, we've got Syed Zafar Islam from the Bharatiya Janata Party, and Gaurav Pandhi joins us from the Congress. So welcome to all our guests.
The first big numbers are the numbers that we are looking forward to, which is what would happen if a Lok Sabha election was held today in August of 2022. Rahul, give us the big numbers.
So I just want to give you the vote
and the methodology also,
with the caveat that this poll is in two parts. A large part of the poll was conducted before Nitish Kumar decided to jump ship, and that's what you're seeing in these vote share numbers, where in 2014 the NDA had 38% of the vote share. That's now going up to 41%. The UPA had 23% of the vote share in 2014, not going up very much, only at 28%. But when you see the seat share numbers, you'll see them in two iterations. The first part is the number that we picked up on the 1st of August, which is when Nitish was still in the NDA camp. And the second number is from the 10th of August, when we conducted a snap poll just for the state of Bihar to try and assess what might happen in Bihar and thereby how would that impact the national big picture. So these are the vote share numbers. That said, let's call on the screen that one number that everyone's looking out for. What would happen, Rajdeep, if elections were held today? What would the new Lok Sabha look like?
And that is fascinating, Rahul, because as you look at those numbers clearly now, you are seeing that Narendra Modi and the NDA are still holding firm. Remember, what remains of the NDA, most allies have now left. So when we look at the NDA, it's really BJP. Most of the allies are single-digit numbers, 307 out of 543 if elections were held today. UPA 125, others 111. And this is, of course, clearly suggesting the pattern that has been built up since the last couple of years, where steadily the NDA has remained over the critical 300 mark. Because once they're over 300, that means on their own, the BJP continues, as per our polls, to to have a majority. So that is the latest number. And now you want to tell us
the 1st of August.
This is from the 1st of August, so it does not include...
Let's add that. Let's just add that. Now the numbers on your screen are from the 10th of August. This includes the Bihar snap poll. And when we included the Bihar snap poll, the NDA tally comes down by 21 seats. The UPA tally goes up to 146, that's up 21, and others are at 111. But remember, I also want to highlight the recency effect. Because the switch happened as close to the snap poll and as close to the mood of the nation, it almost always appears to be magnified, which essentially means as the weeks and months wear on, it is possible that the impact of the split may not be as much. But at this time, if you add that snap poll, the BJP seems to have lost 21 seats, 286 for the NDA.
That's right. And that number becomes significant because once you're below 300, then you're looking at a potential situation where any further dip and you are inching closer and closer to that magical 272 mark. So the BJP will hope that what you've said just now in Bihar, the snap poll only gave an immediate fallout of Nitish Kumar's dramatic shift in alliances. Over time, the BJP will hope to recover ground in Bihar. But remember, Maharashtra also, we've seen major changes in the last 2 months. How will that play out? So there is an element of uncertainty, Rahul. Very quickly, the methodology.
So I just want to give our viewers a sense of the methodology used by C-Voter in this poll for the India Today group. Remember, there were 22,861 respondents who were sampled over 2 weeks by C-Voter for India Today. Apart from this, there's an additional sample of 96,696, which is the C-Voter sample as part of its continuing weekly political tracker. That apart, because of the changing dynamic in Bihar, there was a snap poll conducted on the 9th of August, which had a sample of 2,479. So net about 120,000 people spoken to as part of this very elaborative polling exercise. Rachingappa must have been a nightmare because you've got the permutations and combinations of the political blocks changing even while your poll was out in the field.
But as Rajdeep was saying, I think the direction is pretty well set. They may have lost in this whole Bihar episode about 20 seats, but it is clear that the NDA still has the majority. And when we drill down the BJP seats, from 283, they came down to 275. So it actually bucks a trend. Normally at this time, you will have anti-incumbency at its height. If you recall, Dr. Manmohan Singh in his 9th year, 2013, there was the entire rupee devaluation or depreciation that happened. The economy was in trouble and corruption charges were at its height. And when we took our poll at that time, there was a clear meltdown that was happening. And if you recall, during Indira Gandhi's time as well, 9 years of hers, in 1973, you had the oil shocks, you had the entire problem of, again, unemployment and inflation. And by 1975, she had imposed an emergency. And here, therefore, I call this a rare phenomenon. What Mr. Modi, Narendra Modi and his team are demonstrating is a rare phenomenon that in the 9th year, one would have expected a lot more sort of decrease in their popularity. Instead, they seem to be heading to a clear majority.
Editor-in-Chief, Rajdeep,
I would just like to say that it is both a phenomenon and a paradox, because if you look at the circumstances that he's getting this majority, there's everything that is going wrong. There is inflation, there is unemployment, there is a Ukraine war that is heading towards a global recession, and you still have a COVID pandemic lingering on. And yet, in the midst of all this, any other government would have crumbled in some senses. They're holding on. And I think that's the phenomenon. Right. The paradox is, why are they holding on?
In his editor's note, India Today editor-in-chief Arun Puri compares Modi with Ronald Reagan, Rajdeep, making the point that he seems to have this Teflon coating, which no matter what the adversity and what the challenge in terms of economic distress, in terms of COVID management, it doesn't seem to be impacting his net popularity, which 9 years on is pretty phenomenal.
Two aspects to it. One is, of course, the cult of Modi, which is, you've got to see him, therefore, not as your normal politician. The second, I think, and maybe Rahul Srivastav can amplify more on this because he tracks the PMO and Finance Ministry, is this whole Labharti beneficiary project that this government has undertaken. And I think that somewhere suggests that can offset anti-incumbency at times and build in an element of pro-incumbency. We've seen, Rahul, in recent times, governments that deliver on the ground are getting re-elected. In the last 10 years, anti-incumbency has actually given way to an element of pro-incumbency. Tell us, do you think that that is the focus in a way, and the reason perhaps why Mr. Modi is still able to not have a meltdown.
See, Rajdeep, delivery is definitely one element, that you have given food to 80 crore people over a very long sustained period. It has been a terrible strain on the budget of the government. If you see Ujjwala Yojana, it's faltering. But still, if people are backing Narendra Modi, I think the biggest reason is that who against Modi is in a better position to deliver. The comparison is there. The people say that if not him, who else can be there to deliver as good as he can? I think that is one, that credibility element, not delivery, but credibility element.
In contrast to the opposition.
To everybody else.
Okay, we'll come into the opposition in a moment, but you know, that's an interesting factor, Rahul Verma. I was looking at some figures the other day that till 2012, till about 10 years ago, most governments in India were voted out. In the last 10 years, we are actually seeing more governments being voted in than out. Is that a sense you get that Mr. Modi has captured, as our poll seems to suggest, an element of pro-incumbency where despite all the problems that we have with the economy, with Ukraine, with COVID, he still is able to pull it off? Is it the lack of opposition, or is there something that Mr. Modi's government may be doing?
Thank you, Rajdeep, for this question. Actually, anti-incumbency is made up of three elements. First is dissatisfaction with the government, or dissatisfaction with the current situation you are in. Second one is you blame the government and the leader. And third, you think there is an alternative where you can shift and they will provide better solution to the problems you are in. And I think what Raj and Rahul are pointing out, basically a mix of these three things. There are economic concerns, and if you go out and ask people, they would tell you about their economic concerns. But what BJP is able to do, one, they have managed to avoid the blame on the government, and especially from Prime Minister Modi. They have shown political agility to find solution to some of the problems, as you mentioned about the welfare schemes. So, of course, there is problem on economic fronts, but they have managed to offset some of the problems by delivering on these welfare schemes and every time creating a new constituency. So they lose one group or they lose one state, but they try to win something new, right? So this political agility is also keeping them afloat. And third, of course, as Rahul pointed out, is the opposition's weakness to provide an alternative in form of a leader, in form of a message, and other things.
Manisha, Priyam, is there any example globally that comes to your mind, 9 years in, a leader more popular than he was when he got elected, at least as popular even by the admission of his opponents, and whose popularity at this moment doesn't seem to be challenged despite being well into his second term and en route to a potential third term in office?
So I would say almost none. The only examples we have are of leaders who were more backed by ideological frames. A Cuba, for example, a Cuban leader, for example, a Fidel Castro, for example. But those were ideological moorings. Here you have a Narendra Modi, and I do think that the reasons for this kind of political stability in his innings is also because of the fact that Mr. Modi is a perpetual politician 24/7. Remember, one of the factors that our esteemed panelists haven't referred to until now is the fact that no election, whether won or lost, is small enough, and the Prime Minister or the Home Minister do not leave even a Pradhan or a Zilla Parishad election to be out of their sight. And as soon as they've fought an election, whether they've lost the election or they've won the election, they are there to recruit their people, who will be their people. Now, in Indian politics, we've had regional satraps who've had their people, apne log, apne aadmi, within one political arena. But Mr. Modi's masterstroke is that he's been able to do it on scale. And therefore, even state elections where he loses, there is an eye always on the Panchayat or the Zilla Parishad and urban elections. But even state elections where he loses, it's something where the discussions, I'm sure, are held on a daily basis, on a regular basis, on a weekly basis. I don't know what that routine is, but even the small and the minutiae of politics and electoral politics does not go away from the drawing board that he looks at. To that extent, his focus on detail is that of what an army chief would be. to every ravine, to every grain of where there can be a movement. And that focus is absolutely a bird's eye focus, a worm's eye focus on what exists on the ground.
One of the things which is interesting, Rahul, is that this government has made mistakes, but has an ability to correct those mistakes very quickly. Moment they see that something is not going down well with the people, how do we course correct?
But they are blessed
that's where the politics.
But they are blessed by an opposition that doesn't know what it's doing. Because if the opposition is able to pounce on the mistake,
sure,
then it's much tougher to do a reversal.
Opposition will turn around presumably and say, you in the media don't drive those mistakes home hard enough. That's what they're going to say. For example, demonetization, some would argue that it was a blunder that could have cost many other governments. You didn't go for Mr. Modi. But my belief is, you recognize your mistakes and you quickly course correct. For example, farm laws, you realize there was an agitation out there which could spiral out of control. Okay, we'll hold back for a moment.
Largely apolitical opposition, not led by any of the big opposition parties.
That's right. But, therefore, Gaurav Pandey of the Congress, as you're looking at these early numbers, who do you hold responsible for the fact that anti-incumbency has not set in even into the 9th year? Is it the failure of the opposition? Is it, as you often do, blame us in the media, the messengers? Who do you blame for the fact that you haven't picked up, despite objective conditions being such that the opposition should be doing a bit better?
Rajdeep, two things. One is that in the beginning, as you said, that the Bihar does not represent, or Bihar is not India, as the equations in Bihar have changed. Similarly, I would say that the data that you're presenting also does not represent India. There are more people in Bihar than the number of people questioned in the data in your survey. See, our country, as all of you have agreed, I really appreciate everyone has agreed that we are reeling under huge crisis. Inflation, unemployment, there is a GST which is flawed, and there are many issues which the country is facing. What response do we get? Why Prime Minister Modi? Why you're saying that Prime Minister Modi? Because there are two things: that he's popular, and he as the panelist before me said, that he works for long hours. But unfortunately, that is not going to help the people of India. That is.
Sir, you're not answering. No, Gaurav, let's get a straight answer. Why is it that he's holding firm? You see, you can argue you don't have a large. Please understand, 1,25,000 is a very large sample size. So let's not go into that. You tell me, why is it that as per our poll, he's holding firm? You must have an explanation.
He is not holding firm. BJP is losing. They are on a losing spree. In Maharashtra, they have actually stolen the mandate by putting a lot of money, as we all know. Otherwise, you see all of their allies, they are dumping the BJP. Why? In 2004 and in the run-up of 2014, there were political parties willing to join NDA. But now the reverse is happening.
If you look at the numbers from the 1st of August, you can safely say the BJP is likely to romp home in style. That's the way it looked. But come the 10th of August, suddenly minus 21 seats in Bihar, the opposition sends a chance, and then things don't look quite as settled. BJP is still in pole position, but not quite as settled. Let me take you through what might happen in Bihar according to this India Today Mood of the Nation poll if elections were held today. And remember, this is a snap poll conducted after Nitish Kumar jumped sides. So let's take the vote share details first. The NDA at 54 in 2019 in the Lok Sabha elections, down to 41% on the 10th of August. That's a fall of 13%. The Gathbandhan from 31%, which was largely the RJD vote share, up to 46%. That's up 15%, a gap of about 5% between the NDA and the Mahagathbandhan. 5% gap in a two-cornered elections is big. Let's now look at seat share in Bihar. And here is where the BJP starts to lose ground. They're likely to come down to 14 seats. That's a loss of 21. The NDA earlier had 35 on the 1st of August. So that's a big fall, Rajdeep, in the NDA's fortunes, with the JDU walking across.
Remember, Bihar, Rahul, is the only Hindi heartland state where the BJP has never got a majority on its own. And the BJP has never been able to discover a strong leadership of its own that can take on the Lalus and the Nitishes.
But they don't always need a strong leadership. For example, in Tripura, they won without having a strong leadership initially. In Assam, they won in a state where they'd never won, where the electoral dynamics are arguably tougher for the BJP than they are in a state like Bihar.
You're right, Rahul, with one caveat that I think there's a distinction we have to draw at some stage between Lok Sabha and Vidhan Sabha. In Lok Sabha, which are increasingly becoming presidential, where people are saying, "Kaun banega Pradhan Mantri?" I think the BJP, by virtue of the fact that they have in Narendra Modi someone who's tried and tested, versus the opposition, which seems very disparate. Even Nitish Kumar himself, his own personal popularity has been declining. That gives the BJP an edge, as we saw in UP. I've often believed if Mayawati and Akhilesh had tied up in a Vidhan Sabha, they might have had a better chance than in a Lok Sabha. That's my sense, though.
Syed Zafar Islam, does Bihar suggest a threat and a problem to the BJP? The fact that someone like Nitish Kumar is feeling stifled, undermined, jumps over, joins the Mahagathbandhan. The poll seems to suggest the NDA could lose 21 seats because of him switching over.
Rahul, first of all, we were discussing about why NDA and for that matter BJP is going to lead in 2024 election. The outcome is very apparent, whatever you have suggested today, but it is primarily because it is being led from the front. We have a leader who is leading from the front. The Honorable Prime Minister's admiration by the people of this great country is unimaginable. Countless number of people will die for him, and that suggests that we have a strong leader who understands the mind and the chemistry of the people, and who is always available to do things for the people of this great country. That is something which has earned him a lot of admiration. Secondly, when it comes to Bihar, we do not see any big change in numbers. You had projected 35, it may marginally go up or down, but people of Bihar are fed up with Nitish Kumar. People of Bihar are fed up with RJD, and Nitish Kumar has fought election as a separate party, JDU, in 2014, and you know what was the result at that point in time. So we are confident, whether it's Bihar, whether it's UP, whether it's any other state, we are going to get not only majority, but everywhere we will rule.
So you're saying, Mr. Zafar Islam, Mr. Zafar Islam, you're saying that you will win in every state. Let's look at another state, because I think Mr. Modi's biggest advantage, or the BJP's, has been in north and western India. We've seen in Bihar the BJP going down. The other state which has seen tectonic change in the last few months is Maharashtra. And look at the numbers for Maharashtra, because Maharashtra now, with the Shiv Sena, Shinde, BJP government, projected seat share is showing a dramatic shift from 2019. This time, if elections are held, NDA comes down to 18 from the 43 that they had in 2019, and the UPA goes up to 30. So if this Vikas Aghadi holds together, that's the Shiv Sena Thackeray faction, NCP and Congress, they actually are completely on the up in Maharashtra. So Zafar Islam, this is why, when we go state by state, Maharashtra and Bihar are possibly two potential game changers. 88 seats between them, and the NDA is losing out to the UP, or the BJP is losing out to the UPA. You don't agree with that?
No, Rajdeep, you are from Maharashtra, I am from Maharashtra. We have seen the two political parties, how BJP is growing in the state of Maharashtra, and how the popularity of Shiv Sena is coming off. It is so apparent for everyone, and they were winning only because they were aligning with Bharatiya Janata Party. In isolation, they cannot win few seats here and there without Thackeray. And now with it is splitting right in the middle, we know that the without Thackeray faction will not even be able to win few seats.
You're saying,
in 2024.
Sir, Zafar Islam, the worry that you should have in both Bihar and Maharashtra is the sheer size of the alliance ranged against you.
No, but you're assuming here, if this is correct, that the Shiv Sena, NCP and Congress will very comfortably be able to give seats to each other. The moment you sit down on the bargaining table, try and determine who fights from which seat, that's where local, provincial rivalries come to the fore and become so difficult.
Rahul, you're right, but I'm only going by the numbers. We started by the big picture. Big picture is very clear. that anti-incumbency has not set in. Mr. Modi has held it off. The personality of Mr. Modi, in a way, as Mr. Puri calls him, almost Teflon-like. But moment you're going into two states where the arithmetic has changed, once there is that level of arithmetic where you can build this broad alliance, then you're giving it a fight. Then you're virtually forcing the BJP to become a 51% party, which both in Maharashtra and in Bihar is not easy. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's not easy. In fact, if you go to a third state, which is another of our, what I would call swing states in this year's Mood of the Nation poll, it's Karnataka. Going to the polls in April next year, state elections. But look at what our MOTN is saying at the moment. If Lok Sabha elections are held in Karnataka today, the NDA which won Raj Chengappa, your home state, 26 out of 28, is down by half to 13. And the UPA comes up to 13, others too, presumably that's the JDS. Either way, Raj, this is what I'm saying. Politics, when you go state by state, the BJP doesn't look as comfortable as it looks when you look at the big national picture. You know, we need to make sense of that somehow.
Well, you know, firstly, they are vulnerable. The party is vulnerable despite the fact that in this particular poll, they are getting a majority. And just to, you know, after Bihar was lost, you can move from Kanyakumari to Kathmandu without touching a BJP state. That's the sort of thing. But coming to the other point.
So you're saying the southern eastern flank of the country
from Kanyakumari,
Tamil Nadu, the BJP is vulnerable.
Correct.
Even while it holds on to northwest, but loses now in Bihar and Maharashtra as per our poll. So that makes the BJP a little vulnerable.
Yeah, but I would just add a caveat to all that in the sense that what you mentioned earlier, a lot of this is presidential. I would turn it around and say a little more. The Lok Sabha thing, these days you're looking almost like at a CEO contesting. And Modi is the super CEO that is there. People, over a period of time in these 8 or 9 years, he's built trust that he could deliver with all the other problems that's there. And if you take a look at this phenomenon that's happening, anyone like, say, Kejriwal in Delhi, Naveen Patnaik in, Mamata Banerjee, they all CEOs that can convince voters to vote for them. And so if you go at the Lok Sabha level, this is what is going to determine. You don't have someone, as Rahul Srivastava was saying earlier, an opposition leader that could take them on. And I would just add one more point. There's no one in the opposition, say like Bernie Sanders in the USA, who could hammer all these points. After all, you have, price rise, you have joblessness, you have accusations of big business going on. These are fodder for the left. And I think the collapse of the left has ensured the Modi and the BJP government's sort of dominance in this.
But we saw, Rahul Verma, how Prime Minister Modi and the BJP played out the nationalism, patriotism script to the hilt in 2013 and then in 2018-19 in the Lok Sabha elections, where it became about Balakot, it became about keeping India first, and that subsumed all these other issues. What this poll is suggesting in Bihar, what it's suggesting in Karnataka, what it's suggesting in Maharashtra is also dependent on local factors. Do you think that 2019 could be more localized than 2024, could be more localized than 2019, or could it be an encore of what we saw in the last Lok Sabha elections?
And before you take that, Rahul, let's add another state, because let's look at the vulnerable states. Andhra Pradesh, the BJP of course hasn't made any breakthroughs there, but as per the Mood of the Nation poll, if elections are held today, it's 25 to the others who are presumably between Jagan and Chandrababu.
Here we've got YSRCP at 18 and PDP at 7.
So essentially what it's showing is the only real challenge is either you forge a broad opposition alliance like in Bihar or in Maharashtra, or you have strong regional satraps who are not obliged to the BJP. So Rahul Verma, is that an opportunity for the opposition somewhere? Are you seeing that? Or do you believe that the opposition simply is clutching at straws when they look at these 2 or 3 states?
The national election game has now changed in 2014 and 2019. And so my expectation going forward in 2024 is that when the general Lok Sabha elections will take place, the states level specific state level factors will dissolve into a national sort of momentum. And so to answer Rahul's question, we might again see a narrative weaved around nationalism, national government, national leader. BJP would not like the national election or Lok Sabha elections to become or determined by state level factors. Of course, there are going to be states like Andhra Pradesh, which Rajdeep just added, where BJP is weak. They are trying to make inroads, but so far they have failed. But in the southern part, I think what BJP would expect to keep its hold on Karnataka intact, make big gains in Telangana and perhaps smaller gains in other parts of southern India. So yes, it's possible that in states like Maharashtra, in Bihar, or in other places, wherever large number of opposition players can come together, they can certainly put a break or challenge the BJP. But to assume that they are definitely going to overpower or defeat the BJP, I don't think we should.
You mentioned Telangana. Let me take our viewers through the numbers for Telangana, where you've got the BJP picking up 6 seats, the Congress at 3, the TRS at 7, the AIMIM at 1. So some gains for the BJP, but the TRS remains the #1 party. From here, let's come to the state of Punjab with its 13 Lok Sabha seats, where you've got the Aam Aadmi Party doing very well. You've got the AAP, which romped home in style in the assembly elections a few months ago. At 11 seats, you've got the Congress at 2, you've got the NDA at 0. So in Punjab, you've got the Aam Aadmi Party doing very well, and that is interesting because they picked up 4 seats in 2014. Since then, it looked like a downward spiral for the AAP. Now it looks as if it's picking up once again.
But then take the next state, and then you'll see the complications of it. Delhi, 7 seats on offer. As per the Mood of the Nation poll done by C Voter, if Lok Sabha elections held today, NDA wins all 7. Now think about it. Here is a state where AAP has swept every Vidhan Sabha, the last 2 Vidhan Sabha elections, once getting 69 out of 70, then 67. Either way, the moment you go to a Lok Sabha election, the entire narrative changes.
But it also shows you how inept and incompetent the Delhi BJP is, that despite riding on so much momentum, they can't even turn that into a victory, either in an MCD or in an assembly election.
Sure, but Rahul Srivastav, this is a recurring theme, isn't it now, in the last decade, that where Mr. Modi is not on the ticket, the BJP faces a challenge, it declines, especially state elections almost by 10-12%. But where he is on the ticket and where it becomes a national election, that even in Delhi, where AAP has swept to major victories, in the Lok Sabha, 7 out of 7 is what we are predicting. What does that say? Is the Indian voter voting very differently again, national versus state election, irrespective that inflation affects us all the time?
See, Rajdeep, I think inflation and other does get incorporated when the leaders make mistake. In India, price rise and employment, these are the pad-up kind of issues.
You take it for granted almost.
It
they are
comes
factored
later.
in.
If I'm angry with somebody, then I say price rise bahut zyada hai. I don't say price rise as the mainstay of my opposition to a leader.
So you are saying that until anger builds up against a leader, I don't reflect price rise as unemployment as the core issue.
What is very important is, I think the people are looking for leaders, what they stand for. A Kejriwal, a Mamata Banerjee, what Raj was saying, a Mamata Banerjee, a Modi. See, and then what kind of leadership they have in the state and the cadres. Bihar, the BJP has not been able to build inroads into newer demographies as they would have earlier.
No, but the Bihar BJP will turn around and say, "Mauka hi nahi diya na." The local leadership will say, "Arey, aapke hamare upar bithaya hua hai JDU ko mauka to do. We are all ready and raring to go."
But Rahul, this is the fascinating thing about Indian elections. 2014 and 19, in both these elections, BJP swept Delhi. 6 months later, only state elections are held, and Arvind Kejriwal emerges. And 2024 seems to be no different if these numbers are true. The next state, though, is fascinating because remember, Mamata Banerjee is seen in some quarters or perhaps in TMC certainly as a potential challenger, if not 24, then 29. If Lok Sabha elections were held today, and this is another turnaround, Rahul, compared to 2019, NDA gets 7, UPA doesn't open its account, and others, which is Mamata essentially, is 35. Mamata got just about half the seats in 2019. The BJP got 18. So BJP is down 7. So they are down 11, remember, in Bengal. They are down by about almost 20 in Maharashtra. And they are down by another almost 20 in Bihar. So these are the 3 red flags. The red flags for the BJP at the moment are West Bengal, Mamata still carrying on with the momentum, and in Maharashtra and Bihar. So these are the so therefore the BJP will have to make up these losses in other states. You mentioned Telangana as one state where they will make up loss. I still want to see where else will the BJP make up.
We'll go
so
state
therefore,
by state.
Rahul, compared to 2019, remember 2019 NDA is over 350. Already based on August 10th, we are saying they are down to 286. So while we are saying there is no major anti-incumbency against Mr. Modi, there are some warning signals in specific states. I think is a worrying point.
Well, ultimately, they just need to be above the finishing mark to be able to come back to power.
Sure, but I think
that's all that's
286 is a worrying number. I don't know whether Manisha Priyam, you agree with that, but there's a sense I get looking at state-wise, the BJP has certain states it will have to look closely at, and the opposition has opportunities. The opposition has to stop the BJP now in South and West so that the BJP can't make extra gains.
So I think that is also the BJP's biggest opportunity. If something like price rise was an issue when the Congress government was in power and the BJP was in the streets, the BJP was able to turn it into an issue. Remember the number of rallies with, malas of onions and their cadres coming out into the streets. The fact is, there are pan-India issues that may not be of the making of this government, that may be because of global recession, but the fact is that there is no pan-India opposition that is taking these issues to the streets. There is also a trust factor in Mr. Modi, as you can see yourself when you're talking about Delhi, for example. Vote for the BJP, 6 months later, bring in Arvind Kejriwal. In Jharkhand, vote for the BJP, bring in Mr. Modi, 6 months later, vote out Mr. Raghuvar Das, even bring in a coalition government of the discredited Congress and the JMM, but have a different government. So the voter really looks for credible leaders.
I think you make a very important point. I think you make a very important point. About credible leaders, and what's happening is the regional leaders, Rahul, are doing much better. And then we are going to come to the key question, why the BJP is doing so well. Because look at your next state.
Tamil Nadu?
Take a look at Tamil Nadu.
In Tamil Nadu, out of the 39 seats, you've got the DMK Congress alliance, along with the smaller regional parties, expected to pick up all 39 seats. The NDA, which is the AIADMK and the BJP, will fail to open its account according to the C voter opinion poll. So the DMK remains strong in Tamil Nadu like it did in the last Lok Sabha elections.
That's right. They won 38 out of 39 last time. The AIADMK won just one. Now we are saying they'll win all 39. So what's the big picture, Rahul, so far? Bengal and Tamil Nadu, the regional satraps and Andhra Pradesh are holding their own. Where there is a strong opposition alliance building up, like in Bihar and Maharashtra, there's a challenge to the BJP. But now you look at the story.
But you look also wherever there's a direct fight between the Congress
That's
and
what I was about to
BJP.
come to.
Madhya Pradesh, 26 for the BJP, 3 for the Congress. So wherever there is a direct fight, Rajasthan, 25 for the BJP, 0 for the Congress. Gaurav Pandey, your party is simply refusing to be able to put up a fight, and because of its inept performance, it brings the entire opposition down and makes the BJP and Prime Minister Modi seem much more formidable than they would otherwise be if somebody had been fighting with some spirit.
Before you go to Gaurav Pandey, I just want to say the number that stands out from me, when I was doing the 2019 election and looking at it, the post-poll number that will always stand for me, 185 seats, that there were direct fights between the BJP and the Congress. The BJP won more than 170 of them with an average margin, Rahul, of 15%. So that is not changing. Madhya Pradesh you just gave was a state where the BJP swept, right? And we said North India has been swept because of post-Balakot. But the truth is we are now in 2022. This is not a Balakot mood of the nation. This is a nation affected by price rise, affected by unemployment, real issues on the ground. And yet the regional parties can take on Mr. Modi. But the Congress is unable to
I was in Gujarat earlier last week. Congress leaders I spoke to spent time at length explaining why the BJP is likely to win and may get 150 plus seats. These are Congress leaders telling me how it's not like the 2017, there's no partitar agitation this time. They simply don't have the belief that they can fight and that they can win. They, even before the election. And you've got this young guy from the Aam Aadmi Party saying that they have only 10,000 booths out of 52,000 booths presence on the ground, and he's saying we will fight. He has no presence on the ground, a very limited presence on the ground, but has very high confidence about being able to fight. And the Congress, which could actually put up a fight, is simply unable and unwilling to want to give it its all.
So I think that really is the key. You know, the big picture is this. The regional parties are in a position and ready to fight the BJP and the Modi juggernaut. The Congress has to get its act together if the opposition is to have any chance. Because unless that happens, you will have a situation, as our mood of the nation is showing, that state by state, Congress versus BJP states, advantage to the BJP. This despite the fact that, you know, even in Uttarakhand there was an element of anti-incumbency. Today I'm being told by congressmen, look at Himachal. We are going to win Himachal come November, December. But I want to see it happen. I want to see when was the last state where a Congress BJP direct fight went towards the Congress. I'm just trying to go back,
right,
possibly 2018.
Chhattisgarh,
but that is 2018.
Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh.
2018. Yep. So in the last 4 years, the Congress remains the Kamzor Kadi. Gaurav Pandey may not agree to that, but Mr. Pandey, that is the reality. Our poll is showing direct fight. Rahul mentioned Madhya Pradesh, and we can look at the other ones as well. 29 seats, 26-3. Rajasthan, predictably, is also Rahul moving more or less similar.
A clean sweep, 25 for the BJP, 0 for the Congress.
25-0 Rajasthan.
25-0.
What about Chhattisgarh?
Let me look.
Chhattisgarh also is 10-1.
10-1.
10-1. So, you know, Gaurav Pandey, you are the Kamzor Kadi, is one of the factors coming out. You have to get your act together.
Rajdeep, it's a fact that we did not perform well in the previous Lok Sabha elections, but a lot of water has flown under the bridge since then. We have learned from our mistakes, and if we cannot be conveniently, in case of the BJP, looking at the local performance, and then when it comes to the Congress, we say that, the local performance does not matter. Just recently, if you see, in Madhya Pradesh, in the local body elections, Congress has performed well. We are reaching out to the people, not just region-wise, that is in the states, but otherwise also. Now, just from a month from now, we have a 6-month-long yatra planned, which is, again, it's not a campaign for 2024, but reaching out to the people. Yes, there have been mistakes in the past, as I said, but we're learning from those mistakes. We do not have the amount of money to put out our arguments on newspapers or televisions like the BJP does, and the showcase Prime Minister Modi's photographs all the time, which actually adds into his popularity. So, in the traditional way, we are going to go to the people. For 6 months, we're going to walk.
This is not correct. See what's happening in Gujarat, where the Aam Aadmi Party is going out and actually making an effort. There was a huge tragedy, Rajdeep, you would have seen. The Aam Aadmi Party splattered themselves all over the place. The BJP was pretending nothing really happened, because how can there be hooch in Gujarat, which is a dry state? The Aam Aadmi Party went and made it big. The Congress barely made it. Only Jignesh Mewani went to that area and tried to rake up that issue. They're not fighting. When one Congress leader goes, the others, instead of trying to come to his rescue, try and cut him down to size so that he doesn't grow a bada hero ban raha hai. That's how they're trying to take each other down.
And the Aam Aadmi Party is very interestingly targeting the states where there are direct Congress-BJP fights. And they see the vulnerability in the Congress. Take the Congress's vote. In the short run, it will help the BJP. But the AAP hopes to emerge as the principal challenger. No party in this country can emerge a pan-India challenger without first taking on the Congress to the BJP. It's almost become like that.
No, but the better the AAP does, come November, December, the better the BJP does.
That's
the more votes AAP takes away from the Congress and the opposition, the better the seat conversion ratio of the BJP.
That's why today, in the 2 states that are going to the polls in the winter, perhaps the Congress has a better chance in Himachal than it has at the moment in Gujarat, because the AAP is making some gains in Gujarat, not necessarily in Himachal, and some of the local issues in Himachal will trouble the BJP. But my sense, therefore, is the big picture that you're giving us, Rahul, is, as I said, Narendra Modi holding his own in terms of the BJP staving off anti-incumbency. Some troubling signs for the BJP where the opposition is getting its act together either through alliances or through strong regional satraps. But one-on-one fights between the Congress and the BJP is saying, bring it on. So it's almost as if they're saying, Rahul Gandhi and the Congress remain our perfect opponent. We want to take them on. We would have much more difficulty in taking on the others, including possibly in the long run, and Arvind Kejriwal. That's my sense.
Because he gets under their skin.
Because he knows how, because he's recognized how to fight elections as well. The last mile connectivity, Rahul, I believe a mix of Labharti schemes, last mile connectivity, knowing where to put your resources, makes a huge difference. Elections are now fought very differently to what they were fought 10, 20 years ago. More and more evidence suggests that.
Rajdeep, you see what is happening. Arvind Kejriwal has a model to take to people in a new state. Mamata Banerjee takes a model. You know, if she is taken on BJP as a strident right-wing force, she can take it across to other states. What is the Congress standing for right now? That's the problem. What does the Congress leadership stand for?
Maybe what Raj says has an opportunity there. Raj said the absence of a left is being felt at a time when economic issues matter. Now, we are told that Rahul Gandhi is in his Bharat Jodo Yatra going to raise these issues. But will it connect with people? Will it connect is the question. The Congress has two opportunities, I believe, Himachal and Karnataka, which comes, where the BJP again is vulnerable. But can you connect, can you use these issues to connect with people is a huge question mark even
also,
now.
how hard are you trying, Raj?
Look at what they did recently when they went on a national strike against inflation and price rise.
The Black Friday.
The Black Friday. They time it with the fact that they are being, investigated by the ED. The optics isn't good. And coming back to the other issue, I think when you look at Kejriwal, that's the force that you're looking at. Though at the moment he's restricted to, say, 35 Lok Sabha seats, the man has leadership, right? And he has an appeal to the middle class. The problem with him is organization. For the Congress, it's the reverse. You have a PAN organization. You have across many, as you were saying, contesting in direct contest with the BJP, but you don't have a leadership that can take them on. And Rahul Gandhi, by his frequent jaunts and abroad and everything else, looks at politics like a hobby. That's the perception that people have, rather than being committed as Modi is, passionate and committed fully to it.
Sure.
So therefore, I think you have to get that leadership for the Congress. There's so many issues if they had to cash in on.
It's not about the size of the dog in the fight. It's about the fight in the dog that determines what happens in the fight. The Congress simply isn't fighting, and that is the reality. No matter what they say on Twitter, that is not fighting on the ground. That really is the problem. We'll slip into a break, Rajdeep.
Yes.
We'll have more on the other side. Rajdeep and I can talk about politics non-stop. Our producers will panic because you've got lots of breaks to take, but we have a lot more to talk about. Who is the most popular chief minister in the country? Who's most popular in his state? What do people think about the opposition's performance? So we have a lot more coming up on the other side of a very quick break. You're watching India Today's coverage of Mood of the Nation.
Should cannabis be legalized in India? Is it obscene for celebrities to pose nude or semi-nude? To know the answers of several such other questions, read the latest edition of India Today's exclusive Mood of the Nation poll. Subscribe to the India Today magazine now.
Get it, get it. 3, 2, 1. Yeah! Get it! Yeah! Bring it back.
Look how much we sweat. Imagine filling up the 16-digit number of your card, the validity of your card, the name on your card, and the CVV number and the OTP which you will get after that every time you have to make an online payment, regardless of whether you're using a debit card or a credit card. Well, if you don't opt for RBI's new tokenization rules, this is exactly what you'll be doing every time you make an online payment after July 1st. So listen up closely. So essentially, to put it in a nutshell, July 1st onwards, the RBI has said two things. First of all, online merchants cannot store your debit card or credit card details on their servers. Those will be deleted. And the other option that they've given is for the end users. Basically, you have the option of tokenizing your debit card or credit card details. Tokenization is basically issuing you a unique encrypted
Hello and welcome to the India Today Mood of the Nation poll, brought to you with C Voter, bringing us all the big numbers. The biannual exercise in India's leading magazine, India Today, the one poll that is looked forward to because it is the most comprehensive tracker of the mood of... Okay, so Rahul, while the BJP, as our survey is showing, is taking a bit of a hit in Bihar, Uttar Pradesh seems to be still rocking for Yogi Adityanath. What are the numbers for Uttar Pradesh?
So in Uttar Pradesh, according to the C Voter India Today poll, the BJP and its smaller allies could pick up 70 seats. The Samajwadi Party could pick up 9. The Congress 1, which presumably is Raebareli. The BSP 0. Things could change somewhat if the SP and the BSP were to fight together. But they had a bad experience last time. Is it at all possible that Akhilesh and Mayawati come together, given what's happened in Bihar?
I would be very, very surprised. And the fact at the end of the day, these are the numbers why the BJP is doing well. Look, they're holding their own in India's most populous state. They're actually gaining compared to 2019. And therefore, Rahul Srivastav, I don't see
but can Nitish flipping and joining the Gathbandhan be prodding for Akhilesh and Mayawati to come back together? Is that possible?
Even if they come together, see, that's what I was telling Rajdeep also yesterday. Unlike Bihar had a history of zamindari, million agrarian mutinies, so it was more divided on caste lines and communal lines. UP has a history of communal boils, and that is why the polarization. Also, in Bihar, you find that a Kurmi and others, Yadavs, have come along. But in UP, the caste divides are very stark. The Yadavs, the Nuvo oppressors, they are called, of the Dalits. So the Dalits and the Yadavs can't vote very well. And that is why the divides are too sharp. The votes are not cohesive. Akhilesh and Mayawati, they can't come together. It's very difficult. Akhilesh will have to do, see, for example...
And therefore, for the opposition, really, UP is the big opportunity. Until the opposition is able to challenge the BJP in India's most populous state, how do you get a majority? You see, just as the BJP has its problems in southern India, south of the Vindhyas, the opposition's problems primarily lie in northern India.
Mayawati has lost her desire to fight.
If she has lost,
no fight in her,
well, someone has to fight. You see, you can't go into an election.
Has added Yogi, a leader.
Yes.
You know, in terms of leadership, BJP has created... See, if there was a strident Hindutva element about Modi, they have added a Yogi Adityanath, who has added to that stridence. And I think that's what is working for the BJP.
So I think if you looked at the difference, Rahul, between 2022 January MOTN and now, is the BJP has consolidated in Uttar Pradesh even greater, and the opposition has sensed opportunities in states like Maharashtra. But net, that doesn't change the big number, because where else is the opposition going to make gains? That's the problem.
So we'll slip into a quick break right now. When we come back, we'll look at who is the most popular chief minister in the country, in his own state and across the rest of the country, and how do people view the performance of the Modi Sarkar across different metrics. That and more coming up in part B of the India Today Mood of the Nation opinion poll. Stay with us. Back in a moment.
So yes, young people we've seen in today's date are not just suffering from heart attacks, they're having strokes, they're having cardiac arrests. I mean, they're brought dead to our hospitals and nobody knows why. They all just say that, they've always been fit. The definition of fitness is different for different people. Nobody gets their pre-health checkups done. You don't know what's happening in your body. You eat all the junk food and still believe that you're young, so nothing's going to happen to you, but that's not happening. So you might have heard about symptoms like a left-sided chest pain, which is, radiating to the left arm. That is one of the most typical symptoms of a heart attack, but not everybody has those symptoms. You can have profuse sweating just suddenly while you're sitting. You can have shortness of breath. You'll have difficulty in breathing. You'll feel uneasy. You might have nausea, vomiting. So in today's date, a lot of people are having a lot of sugars, a lot of processed foods, packaged foods, refined oils. They have a sedentary lifestyle. There's so much of stress going on, smoking, alcohol. All of these, lead towards more susceptibility towards
Is China more equipped than the US in the race of nuclear weapons? Unlike the previous battles in history, China this time will not stop its military campaigns against the US, which is backing Taiwan. In fact, the US had predicted that China would attack Taiwan. Pentagon released a report in November 2021 saying that China could have 700 deliverable nuclear warheads by 2027 and could top 1,000 by 2030. On the contrary, the US has 3,750 nuclear warheads and has no plans to increase this. In 2003, the US had a total of 10,000 nuclear warheads. As it is clear that China is using its military drills on Taiwan, the US predicted last year that China is expanding the number of its land, sea, and air military and nuclear platforms. Today, it is using its power against Taiwan through land, water, and air. China is building a nuclear triad like US and Russia. Satellite photographs of new nuclear missile silos in western China are also out. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbing said, and I quote, "The report released by the US Department of Defense, like previous similar reports, ignores facts and is full of prejudice." He added that Washington was using the report to hype up talk of the China nuclear threat and describe the United States as the world's largest source of nuclear threat. This leaves us with a question. If the US is concerned about its deterrence power, then why is it helping Taiwan against China?
Welcome to the India Today Mood of the Nation poll, brought to you with C Voter, bringing us all the big numbers. The biannual exercise in India's leading magazine, India Today, the one poll that is looked forward to because it is the most comprehensive tracker of the mood of the nation and tells us who would win if Lok Sabha elections are held today, but plenty more about all that's happening in India in this 75th year of independence. Azadi ka Amrit Mahotsav.
Here are the numbers from the 1st of August of what the Lok Sabha would look like if elections were held at this moment. The NDA at 307, the UPA at 125 and others at 111. The BJP and the NDA comfortably placed above the majority mark. But Rajdeep, things change on the 10th of August once Nitish Kumar has jumped and joined the Mahagathbandhan.
That's right, because if you look at just what has happened between August 1st and 10th, on the 9th of August, we did a snap poll for Bihar, and the entire poll, remember, has more than 1,25,000 respondents. Bihar around 2,500 in the snap poll. The numbers have reduced. The NDA is below 300, and that hasn't happened too often in the last 8 years in the mood of the nation. 286. The NDA comes down to 286, and NDA really now is only the BJP. UPA 146 is gaining 20 odd, others 111. So when you add 111 others that include the likes of Mamata Banerjee and Akhilesh Yadav, 146 plus 111 becomes 257. And for the first time, therefore, if Bihar is replicated in a few other states, we actually might have a contest in 2024. So the big story, Rahul, is that as a result of Bihar, the NDA has gone down, UPA slightly up, but NDA is still way ahead of the UPA. So NDA is still ahead of the halfway mark. Anti-incumbency, even after 9 years, doesn't seem to be enough against Mr. Modi for us to say he won't have a hat-trick. He could well have a hat-trick.
He seems well placed at this moment. If you're a betting man, the BJP and Prime Minister Modi well placed, it seems, for a third term. But remember, in politics, things can change, and they can change fast, as they did in Bihar. Let's now look at who is most suited to be the next Prime Minister. And in this question, 53% of the respondents we spoke to voted for Prime Minister Modi, 9% wanted Rahul Gandhi, 7% wanted Arvind Kejriwal. So more than half the respondents in this India Today Mood of the Nation opinion poll very clearly want Prime Minister Modi. Let's now come to who is most satisfied with his chief minister. So who are you most satisfied with? And here, and this, Rajdeep, baffles me no end. And I know there's a very bright chance that Naveen Patnaik, sitting in Bhubaneswar, could well be watching, because he's actually managed to increase his rating from 71 to 78 between the last Mood of the Nation opinion poll and now. Rachingappa, you know Naveen well. How in the world does he pull this off at a time when anti-incumbency is catching up with people? Sitting where he is, largely inside his house and office, he's managed to get his popularity up by about 7 points from 71 to 78.
Yeah, I think it's good governance. And he does his work quietly. He doesn't shout too much. He's there. I mean, you can see him. There's no corruption charges. There's no taint against him personally in any of these years that he's ruled. And without doubt, if you look at the way he conducts business over there, there is a quiet confidence that he goes. I think people trust him. He's been 20 years there, and people believe in him.
He's the Modi of Odisha.
He's not only that, you know, he defies another aspect of Indian politics. We believe that second generation, third generation dynasts generally tend to be subject to the law of diminishing returns. Naveen Patnaik has defied that. He's defied every stereotype of today's politicians. He's been in power for more than 2 decades. Some would say he, like Jagan Reddy, have started their own party. You know, the Biju Janata Dal may have carry the name of Biju Patnaik, but it is Naveen Patnaik's party, like YSRCP is of Jagan Mohan. But you're right, these are remarkable numbers after 20 odd years. The other two, of course, Hemanta Biswa Sarma and MK Stalin won elections only last year. So they've been in power for...
no, but for Hemanta to come number 2 is quite credible.
See, Rajdeep, but the all factor for Odisha, I think, Naveen Patnaik, which is the last congressman you heard about in Odisha after Mr. Giridhar Gamang gave that one vote in parliament against Vajpayee. Tell me one name in that 20 years you have seen. You can talk about a leader in Odisha. There is nobody.
Sure. I think
there is nobody there.
So I think
obviously, it will all be for Mr. Naveen Patnaik.
You know, the last major leader of the opposition really was Janki Ballabh Patnaik, and that is a very long time ago. We must tell our viewers that these are numbers of people from their home state.
Correct.
So people from Odisha have chosen Naveen Patnaik, from Assam Himanto, and from Tamil Nadu Stalin. But when you look at the big picture, India's best CM you're looking at national numbers, which is more recognition, I think, of their brand value.
No, this is about who people nationally perceive as India's best chief minister. And whoever does well here, huge credit to that leader, because he's been able to build a perception for himself nationally. And there, Yogi Adityanath comes in at number 1 with 40%. He's more than double the lead of the number 2, which is Arvind Kejriwal at 22. Not more than double, but almost double. And you've got Mamata Banerjee at 9. Yogi Adityanath, who is relatively new, second term chief minister, at number 1 with such a clear dominating majority is a phenomenal achievement, Rajdeep.
It is, but it also shows the high recognition that he now has, that he's a pan-India figure. Yogi Adityanath is Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, but is a pan-India figure. The first Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh in more than 3 decades to get re-elected, and after a full 5-year term. So I think that gives him a huge sort of political equity, which he is slowly but surely catching on. Because the interesting question that at some stage we will have in Mood of the Nation is Modi ke baad kaun? Who after Modi? And there, I'm sure at some stage, Yogi Adityanath will be someone to look at very closely, even within the BJP ranks.
No, but what's very clear is that every action of his, Rahul Srivastav, is geared at how his action will be perceived nationally. Whether it is going after this Goon Tyagi, or it is the whole bulldozer action, no matter what you think of it in terms of retributive law. The fact is that he's playing for big stakes. He knows it. Modi sitting in Ahmedabad knew it. Yogi knows it as well.
Because Rahul, best suited to, just adding to that, best suited to succeed Modi. Amit Shah, 25%. This is within BJP. Yogi Adityanath, 24%. Nitin Gadkari, 15%. So Yogi Adityanath will now see himself, and he's young. What is he, 49, 50? So he's, in a position to perhaps be a leader of the future for the BJP at least.
Rahul, actually, you have hit the nail on the head. Last time you heard a chief minister like this was Narendra Modi, who was being emulated, who had a model. I say definitely Arvind Kejriwal is being talked about. There is a Delhi model, but Yogi Adityanath, when he does bulldozer, you find suddenly bulldozer appear in Karnataka, you find them in Madhya Pradesh, you find them in several states, bulldozers are coming up.
Then is that a positive or a negative? No, 1 minute. Is he not also, when you say bulldozer, it's a polarizing symbol as well, right?
See, Rajdeep, it is not matter of positive. It's a matter of positive for the BJP. There is a national narrative which the BJP has been benefiting from, which is the strident,
strong on law and order.
No, but he's capturing imagination, Rajdeep.
Sure. Capturing the imagination.
Bomai is saying, Yogi model apply kar dunga Karnataka mein.
He is the only BJP
coming to your question, Rajdeep, where you mentioned.
I just want to make a point. Only Yogi chief minister for that BJP strident narrative who's taken from UP to various states to campaign. For that strident narrative, he's taken to campaign. He's the only one.
Yeah, you were talking about the second line, and you quoted some figures there where Amit Shah was 25% and Yogi Adityanath 24%. When a question was asked, if Mr. Modi is down there, who is best to succeed him? And these two came forward. But if you compare the two, firstly, let's be very clear, Mr. Modi is like up there, and these two, if you take the national figures, are blips in the horizon. Right? In comparison, they have no stature.
He's like Amitabh Bachchan was in the 1970s.
Absolutely, he's there. So when it comes to, say, a succession that's there, what will determine the factors? There is clearly organization, BJP and the entire thing. Amit Shah there has the advantage. Yogi doesn't have. He has not got the kind of, both the expertise in terms of conducting national elections, as well as the kind of reach that he has in the organization. So that's something he has to, start making up for. The second thing is, in terms of a model of government, which you were talking about. What is the Yogi model of government? It cannot be bulldozers, right? It has to be, just like in Gujarat, Mr. Modi made a difference in terms of a governance model where he showed speed, efficiency, and no corruption, those kind of things, and had a vision. Yogi Adityanath has to outline that vision, and so also does Amit Shah. I'm not saying that is there. And the third factor, I think, very important when it comes to is charisma and connect.
Okay.
Now, there Yogi has it. And that's the reason why, if you see, he gets national popularity because not only does he, is able to communicate a lot of it in this kind of hardline Hindutva way that's there, but he seems to have that connect with the people.
Sure, and he clearly gets the core vote. You see,
no, but I don't agree with this. Even Rahul Srivastav said stridency, and you're saying core vote. Uttar Pradesh assembly election results show Yogi Adityanath's popularity has gone beyond the core. There are people who aren't aligned with the Hindutva vision and his pan-India popularity as well, Rajdeep.
His pan-India popularity is rising.
So whether people sitting in the studio, the Pandits agree or not, he is developing a Yogi constituency which is beyond your core Hindutva constituency.
Yeah, sure, but he is going to have to, I think I agree with Raj, eventually have to flesh out a governance model. You see, whether we say that Mr. Modi was an expert in marketing the so-called Gujarat model, didn't show the flaws, only showed the assets, there was a model that people were seeing almost as aspirational.
No, but he did that.
I don't think the UP model as yet is aspirational.
No, of course not, given how badly off the state is. But see what happened during COVID. He actually administered the state during COVID quite well relative to some of the other states where he moved with speed and purpose. Or take, for example, law and order.
Sure.
Where, I mean, I personally have problems with bulldozers being used on people's property, but people seem to like it. They seem to be clapping for it, and there is that is the reality.
Okay, let's look at this, because I think we are going ahead of ourselves when we say Yogi Adityanath. For now, this is the number to look at. Best suited to be the next Prime Minister of India. 53% are saying Narendra Modi, 9% are saying Rahul Gandhi, Arvind Kejriwal 7%. Let's put this in context. We said at the start, seat share NDA, which is mainly BJP, 286, coming down. Remember, they got more than 350 in 2019. So they are down by more than 60 if you look at the bigger picture compared to 2019. But the moment you go to best suited to become Prime Minister, it's 53%, 9%, 7%. So, Rahul, as we become more and more presidential, possibly in our elections, this is the factor. When people ask me, but, what explains the BJP victory? Somewhere there is, I call it the cult of Modi, call him Teflon-like, whatever, which is holding on even 9 years into power. And this despite high inflation, unemployment, agrarian issues being real issues on the ground.
And the ineptness of the opposition. If it's Australia versus Zimbabwe, it will always seem as if Australia is a much better team because they're up against Zimbabwe. If it's a more equal contest, they'll find some flaws with the Australian team as well. That is the reality. Let's now come to the role of the Congress as the opposition party. Here, you've got 40% of the respondents in the India Today Mood of the Nation opinion poll saying the Congress has done a good job. 34% think they've done a bad job. So it's roughly stayed in that 40, 38, 40 kind of range. The Congress poor has actually gone up from 22, 25 to about 34. So the Congress not perceived well. Now, again, one thing I don't understand is when this question is asked by pollsters, who's best suited to revive the Congress? Manmohan Singh, our former Prime Minister's name comes in at second at 16%. Now, Rajdeep, try and explain this to me. Does it make any sense at all? Rahul Gandhi at 23, Sachin Pilot, I understand, at 14, Priyanka at 9, but Manmohan at 16.
Let's look those numbers. Rahul Gandhi 23%, Manmohan Singh 16, Sachin Pilot 14%, Priyanka Gandhi 9%. The way I see it is that less than 1 in 4 voters believe that Rahul Gandhi is the man to revive the Congress, and that almost non-Nigerian Manmohan Singh, who's hardly been seen in public life, is at 16%. It shows that there is no one figure that the Congress has been able to build over the last 8 years in opposition, who is seen by a majority, many of them even Congress voters or opposition voters, as the person who can challenge Modi.
But you have to build someone.
So I think these numbers show the serious credibility crisis. There is the Timo factor. There is Modi only, or the Tina factor. There is no alternative. So I think unless someone becomes 40, 45%, at least almost half the voters should say, no, you're the person we want. They haven't found that person.
But something has to happen, right? For example, if someone like a Sachin Pilot had been made Chief Minister of Rajasthan, and if he'd done well over 4-5 years, in that time he could have built a base saying, look at my model of governance, this is why I may be able to do well nationally like Modi did in Gujarat. You have to give somebody an opportunity like Yogi got in Uttar Pradesh. The Congress has failed to do that.
Before we go to our guests, we can look at these two numbers linked to it. Non-Gandhi best suited to revive the Congress. Manmohan Singh still 29% because he's been around. He was tried and tested. Look, Rahul Gandhi's not been tried and tested. He didn't even become a minister. Sachin Pilot 20%.
As opposition leader, he's been tried and tested.
Sure. So clearly it's not worked. It's failed, right? Otherwise his numbers would be higher.
No, but he doesn't accept that it's failed. The Congress doesn't accept that
That's
he's a
his
failure.
problem. Non-Gandhi is best suited to revive Congress as per mood of the nation. Manmohan Singh 29, Sachin Pilot 20, P. Chidambaram 8%. And then the key question, is the Congress better off without the Gandhis? Yes, 52%, no 30%. Now remember, this includes, of course, a number of BJP voters who may well say, give us this answer. But overall, what it shows is that the Congress has not been able to find an answer to its leadership challenge over the last 8 years. As elections become presidential, Rahul, that is going to have to happen. Because unless you find that face as a magnet, as a mascot, as someone who's leading your narrative, it becomes more and more difficult.
Chingappa, 52% of the respondents think the Congress is better off without the Gandhis.
Yeah, but when you ask them who should lead the Congress, you have the Gandhis going 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of a thing. So there is there. But I think what's happening because of this reason, what Rajdeep is talking about, you're getting someone like Arvind Kejriwal to virtually take that opposition space and start challenging, Mr. Modi and the BJP. And the rise of Arvind Kejriwal is a phenomenon that one needs to monitor. Though, as I said earlier, he lacks the organization. He has this very common connect, with the middle class that is there. And that kind of thing of, there's not much ideology. It was just a lot of governance that's there. He's not mixing it with the thing and has a completely leftist approach to a lot of things that's there.
Because
that space that is there,
sure, there is
the
a
left
space.
You see, there's a Congress space and there's a left space. Now, no one has occupied that. And at this time, when you have inflation, when you have, unemployment, this is the area that the left really thrives because they can contrast it with what the BJP is doing. And they're not doing that.
To take your point, the question asked on Mood of the Nation, who is best suited to lead the opposition? Look at it. In MOTN, in January of 2021, that is about 18 months ago, Arvind Kejriwal was at 18%. And in MOTN, January 2022, he dipped to 16%, but now he's up to 27%. So Arvind Kejriwal is 27%. Mamata Banerjee, who was at 11% 18 months ago, is up to 20%. And Rahul Gandhi is at 13%. Now, among Congress voters or Congress leaders, Rahul Gandhi still is ahead of anyone else as the choice. But the moment you make it national, Arvind Kejriwal and even a Mamata Banerjee seem to be ahead. So clearly, the non-Congress opposition, Rahul, today is throwing up leaders who many people believe are potentially better suited to become the Prime Minister of the country or to lead the opposition. At a time when the Congress remains the largest pan-India brand, neither does Kejriwal have the organization of Mamata, national organization, but in a national poll like this, they are seen as better challengers.
So we've got Avni Bansal of the Congress, RP Singh of the BJP is with us, Manisha Priyam and Rahul Verma still with us. Avni Bansal, it's a tricky situation to come in on, but basically the Mood of the Nation holds a very firm vote of no confidence in the leadership of the Gandhi family. The voters are telling you, get the Gandhis out, you'll find a solution. Everyone outside of the Congress seems to believe a revival of the Congress is possible without the Gandhi family.
Rahul, my reading of the Mood of the Nation and your survey is this, that, it just proves that you can fool some people sometime, you can't fool all the people all the time. And I think your survey clearly reveals that in a country where the predominant narrative is communal hatred, and here we have the Congress party, which is actually trying to strike a difference, which is trying to fight for an alternative politics really, which is making a stark difference from the BJP in the following manner. Number one, we are saying that, it's not one face, it's collective leadership. So the fact that you have 1, 2, 3, 4 names, people who are saying that, this can be a person to lead the opposition, to my mind, is a very welcome sign, because it proves that the kind of politics that Congress is pushing for is finally making ground. The second thing, they're all about marketing. We're about governance. And if you look at the figures in the last 2021, we know that, for example, 17% of households have 8,600 rupees per monthly average income. 62% households are at about 14,400 rupees of an average monthly income. In 1 year, you've seen the gas cylinders go from 480 rupees to 1,000 rupees. For the first time, you're seeing in India that we have to put a ban on the export of weeds. You put down a slash of 55 lakh tons on the public distribution system. So in a country where Congress is fighting for people to pick up the real issues like price rise, issues like unemployment, issues like women's safety, I think it is a different kind of a politics. It's going to take time, but it's definitely gaining ground. And the mandate that your report has given or your survey has given, I think is exactly a credit to that point. I think it also needs to be said that the numbers clearly show that Rahul Gandhi still remains, the most popular leader. And I think if there's somebody who needs to have cold feet right now, it's absolutely the BJP. Because as your numbers show, if the opposition were to come together, I think, BJP is seeing a clear exit door. So it's a way you look at these numbers. You can pat yourself in the back and say, we are still at the top of the game. Or you can say, there is trouble.
Rahul Verma, how are you reading the numbers? If you are listening to all of what we've been discussing, what does the big picture add up to in terms of finding someone who can take on Prime Minister Modi and the BJP?
Rahul, basically, one thing is clear that BJP has managed to maintain its lead over the rivals. Second thing which is clear, that the Congress is down and out. Third thing which is clear, that there is a new star rising on the horizon, which is Aam Aadmi Party and Arvind Kejriwal. Other than this, basically all things are details. You can adjust your lens the way you want. But it's clear that, the new game which began sort of like in 2020 after Delhi elections is that, and then West Bengal in 2021, that Congress no longer remains the main opposition party. There are other challengers like TMC and Aam Aadmi Party, which are going to go for the second spot. And so even this competition among the opposition, they of course want to defeat BJP, but they also want to emerge as a bigger player. This competition for the second spot among the opposition parties is going to keep BJP electorally buoyant for some more time. And this competition is basically going to fragment and divide the resources, which is basically going to prove detrimental to the Congress. So going forward, as Rajdeep also mentioned some time back, that now you are basically looking at a situation where Aam Aadmi Party is going to move to every state where Congress seems in a weak position and try to capture some of the votes. So even when there is some dissatisfaction with the BJP, the competition among the opposition parties is going to give them an advantage.
Which is not bad, RP Singh, from the BJP's perspective. If you don't know who you're fighting against, whether it's the Congress, the AAP, or the Aam Aadmi Party, or the Trinamool, you're happy because we are number one. You can keep fighting for number 2 and number 3. What are you making of all the numbers that we've put out so far, and the fact that Bihar seems to suggest that the BJP could be losing some seats in the overall national picture, and you've got Yogi Adityanath emerge as the number 1 chief minister nationally?
Well, there's no doubt that Yogi Adityanath is number 1 chief minister nationally, because he's delivering on ground on all levels, whether it's law and order, whether it's employment, or whether it's the other sectors of the public concern. But that point aside, you were just, I could hear part of it, what you were mentioning about the numbers. As for number of within the Congress, I see Sachin Pilot at a good place, being although he hails from one state and he's just an MLA now, not even a minister, but still he holds a good ground, and it's a good message for Congress to replace the dynasty with someone who is emerging as a leader. I'm not recommending Sachin Pilot, but whoever emerges as a new leader,
if you recommend him, he's added.
So that there can
the last thing he wants is a BJP recommendation.
No. We never recommended him at that time, and it was the internal fight of the Congress, and which is still on within the Rajasthan. I mean, we all know the sort of governance Mr. Gehlot is giving. I mean, the lady was talking about about the communal hatred. We all know what sort of communal hatred is being spread in Rajasthan, how appeasement of Muslims is being done in Rajasthan, and that's leading to a lot of problems in Rajasthan. So, and we have seen it last few months, we have seen it ongoingly happening every month and every now and then. But just point to say, another 1 second. As for Mr. Kejriwal, I mean, all of you are rating him too high. What happened to Mr. Kejriwal in Uttarakhand? I mean, his chief minister candidate lost his deposit. I was in charge of Uttarakhand affair. His chief minister candidate lost his deposit. So I can tell it today that Himachal, they'll lose badly. I seriously doubt that they'll even get some votes to save their security deposits also. Same is case with Goa. What happened in Goa for Aam Aadmi Party? Sorry, accept Punjab because there was a vacuum of Congress and Akali Dal. And take my word, next round we are making in Punjab. Will be the party who will be there serving the people in next round in Punjab.
Okay, let me hold you on to this, but let's come back to the big picture because, for those who might have missed the first part, and Manisha Priyam, you can sort of, dive into that. We've given the big picture that after Bihar, NDA is 286 out of 543. That's going below the 300 mark. Where are they losing out? Maharashtra, Bihar, Karnataka, and we'll give those numbers also to our viewers who've just joined us. In Maharashtra, in Bihar, in Karnataka, NDA is having losses. Where is the NDA holding on to, or the BJP primarily? Uttar Pradesh and most of North India. What we seem to see therefore, Manisha Priyam, the big picture is regional satraps and alliances of the opposition giving the BJP a challenge, but Congress versus BJP states, BJP ahead, and most importantly, who do you want as your Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, well ahead of the competition? What does that suggest about the kind of democracy we are in at the moment? Are we basically in a democracy that identifies with the individual, and Mr. Modi's popularity is even higher than that of the BJP on the ground?
It's a democracy that believes in performers. And remember, it's no longer about the index of opposition unity and swing votes that I remember that these were the backbone of analysis about a decade ago. It's now the performers. Remember, in each of these arenas, people are looking at people, leaders, political leaders who can deliver, who can respond. Mr. Modi is fast at course correction. Mr. Modi has an eye to the granular in Varanasi, even in the last assembly elections, where I could see there were a lot of fights about the Kashi Vishwanath seat and the neighboring Rohania seat, etc. Each of those granular details, Mr. Modi was parked there, and the average Banarsi on the street would say, Modi ji aa jayenge, sab kuch theek ho jayega. So the belief in the leader that he can politically stitch things together, the belief that the leader will course correct, and the belief that the leader will deliver on important issues, these are things that uphold Mr. Modi's popularity. It's not as much about charisma as the fact that he's seen as a real doer on the ground, and I believe that's something that will give him a momentum ahead of the Lok Sabha polls. A lot of the regional satraps will be seen as people who are respected in state level elections. People will say for two different elections, two different leaders. That's the model that's come to stay as far as we can see Mr. Modi and a lot of what happens in the state elections. Having said this, Mr. Modi will also benefit by having stronger chief ministers in some of the BJP ruled states now. That could include a Karnataka, that could include even a Madhya Pradesh, where they've had to, snatch victory from wherever it was lying in defeat. So the BJP also will have to invest in better state level chief ministers, stronger doer chief ministers.
Okay.
A Yogi and a Modi together works. It doesn't happen any other way around. Yeah.
Let's look at the biggest achievements of the Modi government. Handling of COVID comes in at number 1 at 25%, which is interesting given the challenges the country faced during the COVID crisis. People think that's actually the number 1 achievement of the Modi Sarkar. The revocation of Article 370 in Jammu and Kashmir comes in at number 2, with 15% of the respondents calling this the most important achievement. And corruption-free governance comes in at number 3 at 12%, which again is important because people felt there was large, widespread corruption like there was during the UPA. This would have been on the list of problems, as it usually is, and not on the list of achievements. Let's come now to the biggest failures. Here you've got price rise at 33%. Number 1 problem, unemployment 26%, economic growth 10%, communal violence 6%. So communal violence not perceived, Raj, as big a problem. The much bigger problems seem to be economic, whether it is about growth, unemployment or price rise.
Yeah, I think this is what I was referring to earlier. What Manisha Priyam said, Mr. Modi is a phenomenon that he's holding at a time when you have all these major crises, whether the economy is down, where you have prices rising, you have unemployment, you have the Ukraine war, you have a global recession coming, and COVID pandemic still raging, and yet this, the BJP and Mr. Modi are heading for a majority in the 9th year. So that's the phenomenon. The paradox is, how does he do it? And here, when you look at, and I think the answers come through this. There are 3 or 4 fundamentals, electoral fundamentals, I call them. One is prices. The second is jobs. The third is, if you look at it, national security, okay, in this thing. And the fourth is corruption, not in terms of importance. In 2 of these factors, jobs as well as inflation, Mr. Modi and BJP are not doing well. So what is propelling him this popularity? One is corruption, which you mentioned. If you looked at during Manmohan Singh's time, by the 9th year, he was bogged down with scams and everything else. The corruption-free government is one of the things that's propelling him. The second factor which you see, which is I call a national security issue, because COVID is an internal national security issue. And there, Mr. Modi has reversed the entire thing. If you saw 2 years back or in the midst of a second wave, his ratings were phenomenally down in handling of COVID. Now there's a remarkable turnaround to show that he's number 1 in that. And the reason for that is that the entire vaccine program that they did, there was a record and even world leaders lauded, showed that from adversity, he was able to create an opportunity and come out shining. So on 2 factors, there is a lot of trust built as a result of these key factors.
So it's a credibility trust factor, because just look at your own mood of the nation and track it. Mr. Modi's performance. If you look at it from Jan 2020, this is the first MOTN that we did, the second one after the 2019 elections. Outstanding good was 68% rated performance, outstanding good. Very poor was just 13%. Track it right the way, and our worm will do that up to August 2022, where he's now at 66%. He's held his own except one period, Rahul, August 2021, in the backdrop of COVID-2, when there was a genuine concern of the state having almost melted away when people were desperate for oxygen. Then you have the vaccine program really taking off. And as I said, therefore, the ability to course correct. Recognize you made a mistake. You may not officially admit it.
But that was a 1 in 100 year
problem. No, you may not. No, look, the public mood was that the government had failed. The public was not here to listen to that, hospitals could not have handled the oxygen crisis. But that's the one point where his ratings sharply fell to 54%. And even if you look at, in comparison to previous polls, a lot of people said, is he best suited to become Prime Minister? The numbers had sharply dropped, almost half of what they are today. So it's taken 1 year from August 21 to August 22 for Mr. Modi to virtually recover to where he was in 2020. And I think that, in a sense, is an important element of this poll.
May I add 2 or 3 more factors to this paradox that is there? Why is he winning at a time when the economy is down and everything else? One is he's able to deflect, Ukraine and COVID. The blame doesn't come to him. It is a global problem, and therefore he's able to deflect that. The other aspects are, if you take a look at the way he has conducted the Labharathis that we talked about, the fact that the welfareism thing moved at the forefront. So he's combined 3 factors. One is the Hindutva factor, where he gets the Article 370 done, rebuilding of the Ram temple. So on the Hindutva voters, he is, all boxes ticked. Then when it comes to poor, he's appropriated the plank of the left and the socialists and delivered welfareism like you've not seen. And very, very smartly has combined it with hyper-nationalism. And there you see that in the way we approach Pakistan and China, which you see the polls also endorse it, he's able to bring these 3 factors together. It's a fine balance. The danger is this, Rajdeep, which I'd like to just mention, is that as we go forward and the economy continues to tank, would he move to the other fronts, which is, rather than focus on welfareism, polarization? Will the BJP do it? That's the worry that
Is there a red flag, Rahul Srivastava? In these numbers, is there any red flag? When I see 33% price rise, unemployment 26%, these are big numbers. Clearly, and contrasted with COVID-19. Yes, it gives COVID-19 vaccine program taking off, gives you trust. But when prices are high, 7%, and unemployment remains relatively high with the fear of a global recession, is that the one red flag? Is there a red flag at all in these numbers that Mr. Modi should be worried about, apart from the decline in Maharashtra and Bihar and individual states?
Rajdeep, there are 2-3 points. See, what Raj is saying is a very interesting point. In this 74% in January 21 and August 21, it fell 20 points for Narendra Modi.
That was last year.
Because it seems COVID was a national phenomenon. States were also responsible, but Modi got blamed for it. And similarly, he recovered, and the benefits he reaped, while all chief ministers might have worked for it, he got the benefit that he is doing something to control COVID, and that's credible. Because he is a central figure, so much so central in today's politics that he got blamed for the COVID losses and he got the benefits. When you look at the red flagging, which you are saying is a very critical point, all these are fine. The point is, what Raj is saying is interesting. There are other things propelling him. When we talk about what will happen in 24, see, this government is not going anywhere in the next 1.5 years. Modi is going to be around. Modi has to make a big mistake, one. Second, there are a lot of good and bad news. Opposition unity in states is bad news, Bihar and others. Strong regional players, bad news. Weak Congress, damn good news. Modi image, very good news. Ram Mandir can be the Balakot of 2024.
So you bring
is good news.
You construct the final construction Jan 2024. What Balakot did in 2019, you bring an element of Hindutva nationalism in 2024.
But there is one big negative, which I can see now, which everybody can see. Post-Maharashtra, and alliances are a reality. Post-Maharashtra, small parties will get wary of BJP's alliance capability. You see, Bihar was an example. BJP wanted to show that, see, we are good allies. You know, they had lost Shiv Sena, they had lost TDP, so they wanted to prove, see, they have lesser number of seats, GDU, but still we are backing. But that has boomeranged, and Maharashtra has undone that. I think it's getting very lonely at the top for the BJP.
You know, I keep saying that the BJP has lost more than 20 allies, Rahul, between 2014 and 2022, large and small. It's now not the NDA, we should rename it as BJP MS, BJP Modi Shah. This is a predatory political force. This is not the BJP AV. AV was Advani Vajpayee, which was consensual. This is a very different animal. And therefore, you know, there's a very interesting question in the mood of the nation. Do you support the BJP policy of bringing down governments? Yes, say 24, no, say 31, BJP not involved. My sense is that the BJP somewhere could pay a bit of a price for having too many, you know, striking at too many fronts.
No, but why not? Take, for example, Bihar. Why should the BJP continue to play second fiddle in Bihar to Nitish Kumar? The fact that Nitish Kumar is a diminished leader, that the leadership space is up for grabs, why should Tejasvi be the beneficiary? If the BJP can play the role of an insurgent, they can set themselves up to do well in a state like Bihar. Given their current state of leadership, organization, this is an attempt the BJP should make from their perspective.
So, from a BJP perspective, no problem. Yes. Every party wants to be expansionist. The BJP is going to be no different, right? This is a BJP which, unlike the Vajpayee-Advani BJP, is a majority party. It's a party like Indira Gandhi's part, wants to expand. But therefore, you can, from time to time, come in confrontation with certain regional sentiments, a sense of regional self-respect, which a Nitish Kumar can try to revive himself with. A Mamata Banerjee will play, a Chandrababu Naidu YSR will play, a Stalin will play.
Which will be a bigger factor in an assembly election than a Lok Sabha election.
But you do not, in an ideal world, the BJP would like to have their governments both in states as well as at the center. One worry for the BJP is we need to create strong chief ministers. You see, the BJP, like with Boma in Karnataka, where are BJP's problems stemming from Karnataka? You compromised in a way, you chose a compromise candidate. And in several states, they've done it. Where you've got a strong chief minister, Hemanta Biswa in Assam, or a Yogi Adityanath in UP, those chief ministers are also delivering. So BJP will have to be conscious of the mistakes that the Indira Congress made. You appointed weaker chief ministers or the so-called puppet chief ministers, and you paid a price for it. But that is one, these are the red flags. Overall, the big picture, and therefore, Avni Bansal of the Congress, what you should be worried about is that at a time of high inflation, 7%, not double digit yet, and possibly coming down, unemployment, which remains a big concern, economic growth, which is sort of leveling off at the moment, communal violence, which for some remains a concern, the Congress and the opposition are not picking up. We are coming back to it. That, we can spin these numbers in whatever way we want. You will blame the media, I'm sure. But at the end of the day, that's the reality. These are the numbers, Abni.
Rajdeep, you're right about the numbers, but see, what we can't forget is that when common people vote, they vote on issues that affect them the most. You know, issues of price rise, issues of unemployment, they cut across the classes. It doesn't just affect a particular segment. It affects the middle class as much as it affects the lower class, as much as it affects the higher class. So I think the fact that the country can now see that this government and Mr. Modi himself might be wonderful at many things, most importantly, marketing. What they are terrible at definitely is governance. What they don't know how to manage is economy. And economy is something that we cannot leave out. Economy is what matters the most. So my sense is that, as your numbers also reveal, in the run-up to 2024, while other factors may definitely have a play, what more and more people are going to realize is that this is not the government that can, take care of the economy. And we as Congress strongly believe that we will not let India become the next Sri Lanka. So I think it is very important to arrest the economic factors. Rest everything can, take care of itself. But economy is something that this government just absolutely
It comes down to whether the BJP and Prime Minister Modi will make a big mistake. If they do, things could change potentially. If they don't, Rahul Verma, things are unlikely to change very much, and the BJP seems on course to getting a third term for Prime Minister Modi. If you were to hypothesize, what could a potential mistake look like? They've been very astute observers and practitioners of politics. Whenever they've, in terms of policy, made a mistake, they've been very quick to dial back. What could a potential mistake at this stage look like in your view?
Before Rahul answers that, let me ask this, Rahul, this. Someone told me X factor China and the build-up of China at the border. Is that something one should look at closely or not? Because it's not being reflected here, but there is a belief that the media hasn't paid enough attention to what's happening on the border. China's growing attempt to sort of set up infrastructure.
We've covered China more than
is that a concern?
Else. But,
is that an X factor,
the way the Prime Minister typically manages to deal with this is he says that I still do much more to counter China than anybody else. When A.K. Antony was there, in Parliament he said there's nothing we can do, we can't build these border roads. The Congress in Parliament has made multiple comments about how they're unable to make border roads because of how difficult the terrain is. Now, with the BDO road that we've made, you've actually got far more infrastructure being created than ever before. China
would we question him more? Because the Prime Minister officially went and said no one's crossed the border, right? That was his official statement. Have we done enough to question that? I'm just raising it as a potential concern that the government should have, because national security, as Raj mentioned, is one of the reasons for Mr. Modi's popularity being high.
Let's assume China does something more aggressive like it is at the moment in the Taiwan Straits. The BJP can spin it to say we are still better positioned to fight China like they did. Remember on the 27th?
Rahul is right. The opposition is not in a position to blame the government in that good a position. Modi has a better capability to turn it and make it a national security interest, rally the people behind him. See, China is the aggressor.
Because China is attacking, you need me to fight China.
Okay, so I was just throwing that up, but Rahul Verma, go ahead, please. Any big mistake, as Rahul says, that Mr. Modi should, any minefield you see between now and 2024? Last year it was COVID. What can it be now?
Oh, I don't know. I can't predict the future. But let me say something. BJP continues to make a mistake. And it's not just BJP. Any party which is going to govern India, which is so large, diverse, with so many problems, they are going to take policy positions which is going to make certain people unhappy. And BJP has been making this mistake, remember, with the Farms Bill, with the COVID and everything. But the point is not about the government making mistake. First, whether they are agile enough to do a course correction, and two, whether the opposition can go to people and basically make them believe that the government has made a mistake and they should be punished and we are a better alternative. So unless that happens, I don't think BJP is going to get a beating because they make a mistake. Second point, and something which Rajdeep you asked, what is the red herring in the data we have seen? One red herring is for sure, if the elections lose national character and they become state specific, the BJP is going to have a problem, right? So wherever in the Northwest, where BJP makes massive gains and continues to retain that gain, BJP has saturated. There is nothing to gain. And BJP has not been able to make any new gains, say in South or in East, right? So no new grounds have been broken. BJP is holding on to the state where it is already saturated. So once you start looking things state by state, elections become difficult for BJP. So red herring for the BJP is not finding a national narrative in 2024. It could be on Ram Mandir, as Rahul Srivastava pointed out. It could be on China, on anything. BJP can actually, under Modi, and that's why people are pointing out that it's a phenomena. BJP can, or Prime Minister Modi can turn even mistakes into advantages. And that's where the edge, the real edge of BJP lies.
Problems that you foresee?
Rahul, you're talking about mistakes. I think we're already there. If you look at India as a house on fire, look at the economy. And this thing that prices, is really not a problem, jobs is really not a problem because no one's out there in the streets, that's fallacious. You had an Agniveer scheme that came, and you saw the kind of riots and everything else when you sort of tried to shortchange, or what they perceived to be shortchanging them on employment. They are all bottled up. The frustrations are there. So unless he is able to deliver on the economy, that's going to be his biggest test. And can I just add a couple of things in this one? Is in terms of dealing with the crisis, and you talked of China and others, I think there are multiple crises that are descending onto India. And the way to deal, whether it is rupee crashing, whether it is China, the big threat that is there, whether it is the economy, the persistence of COVID and the impacts that are there. Now, I think the way it is organized at the moment, he did fantastically well during the COVID period. He got a high-powered group and did it. I think you need that kind of grouping that's there. Currently, what's happened is the second line of leadership kind of works in silos. You need to get high-powered teams working on each of these problems.
But can I flip the argument that you're making to make this case? That over the last several months, Rajdeep, whenever it had seemed that the Indian economy was about to take off, something happened which was so beyond the control of the government that it kind of put a brake on the takeoff of the Indian economy, whether it is COVID, whether it is Russia invading Ukraine, whether it is inflation. Now, some of that seems to be coming under control. The markets internationally are beginning to accept that maybe the worst of inflation is behind us. Interest rates have risen as much as they would or are very close to their peak and could potentially stabilize. And as China continues to bully Taiwan and more people start looking away in a China 1+1 policy, it is possible that a lot of the pent-up economic growth which has been held back for various factors could take off, and the BJP and the Prime Minister could be in a very clear zone as we come towards 2024.
I couldn't agree with you more. That's what I've been hearing from a number of analysts who one respects, that actually 2023 could be much better than 2022 has been. Look, we've had 3 tough years. We've had 2 years of the pandemic, and we've had 1 year of a war that has resulted in a global recession or potential global recession. 2023, a slowdown. Some parts of the world are experiencing recession, others are in a slowdown. But 2023 could be better, and India could be better positioned to exploit the changing economic environment, which can only work to the advantage of the Prime Minister. I would say, if I had a red flag, I go along with Rahul Verma and the events that we've seen in the last 2 months. When you become a predatory political force, you suddenly find a range of political parties who otherwise might have been neutral suddenly turning against you. It doesn't mean that the BJP cannot still win an election, but then you have to become a 51% political force, which is more difficult. So in those 4 or 5 key states, which will decide every election in India, the Maharashtras, the Uttar Pradeshes, the Bihars, the BJP needs to be careful that it does not reach a stage where it becomes this sort of hyper-ambitious force that seeks to crush everyone. Use the ED here, use the CBI there, because that can have a backlash, and that is the only thing I think that can really stop or at least give a few sleepless nights to the BJP machine. That's the only thing I see if I were to see a red flag today.
So we've had a fascinating 2 hours of political coverage. We'll have more for you through the next few days as we look at how the economy is doing, how people perceive the performance of the government in different aspects of foreign policy, and different other questions to do with general communalism in the country, people's perception around it, performance of the government across different parameters. So we have a lot in this Mood of the Nation package still lined up for you. We'll come back with it tomorrow, same time. I hope you enjoyed our broadcast. Rachingappa and his team have been working hard to bring this package together. You can also pick up India Today magazine on the newsstands now. Rajdeep, we'll see everyone again tomorrow at 8.
Thank you and stay well.